Is the US dollar replaceable? For decades, the US greenback has essentially been the de facto global currency. From foreign bank reserves to the pricing of gold and oil, the US dollar reigns supreme. But that dominance is now being challenged.
Can the US dollar remain the global reserve currency?
Absolutely not.
So there's a very, very strong motivation for a lot of countries to move away from the dollar.
The US dollar is in danger of losing its status as the world's reserve currency. So how likely is a capital war between China and the US?
The US dollar's supremacy can be traced back to the Bretton Woods Agreement. Created after the Second World War, many countries began pegging their currencies to the dollar, which was pegged to gold. But even after the US left the gold standard in the 1970s, its currency remained dominant. Because during that decade, OPEC also agreed to price their oil in US dollars. Today, almost every global transaction is done using America's money.
The US used its control of the dollar to increase surveillance of global money flows and curb financing toward bad actors. It did this by imposing sanctions on its rivals. Under the system, if a business or country tries to trade with a sanctioned entity in dollars, the US has the power to cut off its access to US currency.
But now, other countries are challenging the dollar. In March 2009, China and Russia called for a new global currency. One that, according to the former governor of the People's Bank of China, is disconnected from individual nations and is able to remain stable in the long run. China's concerns center on the trillions of US dollars it holds as reserves and the possibility that they would lose value with inflation. That's why they called on the IMF to develop a currency that would be an alternative to the dollar. That didn't happen, but in 2016, China's yuan became another one of the world's reserve currencies. By 2020, central banks across the world were holding $221 billion worth of yuan. That's a small portion compared to the $6.8 trillion held in US dollars. Many analysts argue that China is working towards displacing the greenback, and it's taking steps like this to make that happen.
You've heard of petrodollars, but what about petro-yuan? The US dollar has been the main currency for oil futures contracts, so launching a contract in its domestic currency is a sign that China wants the yuan to play a bigger role in global oil trading.
According to some analysts, China is also leading the world in developing a national digital currency, which could be a game changer.
The country would be the first major economy to introduce a digital currency in the real world. Meanwhile, the central bank is also looking into ways to make international transactions possible in digital yuan.
Russia, with its vast oil wealth, is also challenging the US dollar's hegemony. In 2020, during a regional security summit of the SCO, which comprises countries across Eurasia, Russia advocated the use of national currencies within the bloc. And back in 2019, Russia signed a deal with China to use their own currencies to settle trade accounts.
The two countries are refocusing on a mutual goal, using their own currencies instead of the US dollar. A goal of $200 billion in annual trade still stands, but that trade may not be denominated in dollars.
The new development bank, established by the BRICS countries, also has policies that encourage local currency lending. By 2019, a quarter of the $15 billion in financial aid given by the bank was in their national currencies.
When you're trading with another country, to invoice that country in rand or in rupees or in rubles rather than in dollars as a way to lessen dependence on the US dollar. And Russia's saying it wants these 5 countries to do that a lot more.
Although the US dollar remains the most dominant currency, America's share of the global economy is shrinking. In 1960, it comprised 40% of global GDP. Today, it makes up only 25%. And as the US Federal Reserve continues to print money, the future value of the dollar remains uncertain. All that is forcing countries like China and Russia to find workarounds to rely less on American money. But the key question is, will the rest of the world follow their lead?